everyone, and welcome to an episode of, I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, but I was thinking about something fun to do in addition to my etymology videos, and I noticed that a lot of folks on my feed are putting out recipes, so recipes of food, recipes of drinks, and I thought, oh, that'll be fun, maybe I'll do a recipe of a drink. And when I started looking up recipes, I found one for a gin fizz. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, kind of a throwback. And gin kind of gives me warm emotions as well, because my Uncle Bob and I used to have G&Ts together, and we would sit there and tell stories and talk and everything like that. So I thought, okay, cool. But a gin and tonic is fairly straightforward. Gin fizz has a little more involved. So I thought, great, I'll show everyone how to make a gin fizz. But because it's me, I can't just do that. I started looking up to see if there were any fun stories or anything about the history of gin. And the more I read, the crazier it got. The history of gin is insane. It's like an alcohol Game of Thrones. I went down like a gin rabbit hole reading all of this stuff. And so I have to share it with you. It's just too good not to. So gin, let's start at the beginning. So gin is a grain distilled alcohol that's been infused with juniper berries or juniper extract. And it's approximately 40% alcohol by volume. We have our first written evidence of gin all the way back in 70 AD, where there was an encyclopedia of different herbal medicines. And this person recommended taking juniper berries and infusing them in wine and using it for chest ailments. All right. Moving forward in time, we get to the 16th century when the Dutch invented Genever, which was malt wine with juniper berries in it to kind of mellow out the taste, since malt wine was kind of harsh. And as time went on, Genever got shortened to just gin. Moving to 1689, William III became King of England, and with that, he decided what he really wanted to do was to bolster the British economy, but he wanted to do it by taking down the French economy. And so he decided to enforce blockades. He put really, really heavy taxes on things like cognac, French wines, things like that, and he instituted the Corn Laws, which gave special tax breaks and compensation to distillers. So now, all of a sudden, there's this massive just gin boom. It actually created a period in time of British history called the gin craze. It was cheaper to have a pint of gin than a pint of beer, which I can't imagine drinking an entire pint of gin, but it was all the rage back in the day. That's what everyone was having. So it wasn't the gin that we know today. It wasn't always distilled properly, and they found all sorts of crazy things in it. Things like turpentine, sulfuric acid, sawdust. People were literally going insane drinking this stuff. People were dying. And so the government realized, okay, maybe a gin free-for-all is not what we should have done. And so they enacted the Gin Act of 1751. And it raised a lot of taxes and fees for retailers. It made distilling licenses really, really difficult to get. And they started this massive propaganda campaign to take down gin. There were all of these propaganda etchings that came out that, if any of you remember the Highlights magazines with the Goofus and Gallant cartoons in the back, you wanted to be like Gallant and want to be like Goofus. Okay, this was the alcohol version of that. So on one side, they would have Beer Street, and it showed everyone being very posh and proper and having their beer and living their best life. And then over on the other side of the etching was Gin Lane. And they legitimately had things on there, like a woman completely out of her mind, insane on gin, dropping a baby off the side of a stairwell, a drunk man walking through the streets of town with a baby on a spike. I'm not kidding. These are legitimate examples. A barber going through the streets, all Sweeney Todd-like, syphilis sores, all sorts of crazy stuff. So they really, really were like beer good, gin bad. They really were trying to say that if you were proper British, then what you needed to do was have beer and tea, and not so much with the gin. And for the first time in quite a long time in British history, a pint of beer was less expensive than a pint of gin. But it didn't last very long, because in 1830, a gentleman, a French-born Irishman by example, named Ananias Coffey, invented a new type of still. And this really revolutionized liquor production. Everyone started using this still, and it took out the sawdust-infused gin that people were drinking and gave us much closer to the crystalline elixir that we have today. And this was also helped in reviving gin production also by the British Royal Navy. The British Royal Navy carried London dry gin with them on their boats, because beer doesn't really do well in the hot underbellies of those same boats, but gin does okay. Now, they also were traveling to a lot of malaria-stricken areas, and so the sailors had to have quinine to help prevent and treat malaria. Quinine doesn't taste very well, and so the Schweppes company actually invented Indian tonic water to help the quinine taste a little better. But of course, you're on a ship, you've got this quinine, still doesn't taste very good, or rather the tonic water doesn't taste very good, but oh, we have this gin, and that does taste good. I wonder what happens if we mix the two of them together. Gin and tonic, but it gets better because what they also had a lot of on the ships were limes because they have anti-scurvy properties. You certainly don't want to have scurvy, so they'd toss a lime in there. And also they wanted to make sure that those limes were preserved, and so they would often make lime cordials. We have lime cordial, we have gin, let's put those together. Boom, you get a gimlet. So because limes were so greatly consumed by sailors, they actually got the nickname limey. So if you ever heard someone being called a limey, then it actually comes back to the sailors and all those limes that they were eating to kind of stave off scurvy as they went. Now, when we go forward in time to World War II, we have the Blitz. So the Germans are bombing London, but they didn't just bomb London. They also want to bomb Plymouth because there was a huge naval base there. And obviously that's something that they wanted to take out. Unfortunately for them, another thing that was in Plymouth was the home of Plymouth gin. And it is said that when the Navy heard what had happened, they were incensed. One sailor was quoted as saying, well, Hitler just lost the war. Because it's not enough that London has been bombed. It's not enough that the naval base has been bombed. They've also taken out Plymouth gin. Completely unacceptable. So that was obviously the turning point in World War II. They took out the gin. Hitler's gone. Now to modern day. In 2008, the company Sipsmith actually had petitioned the British government for many years and was finally granted a distiller's license. And it was the first distilling license that was issued in the UK since 1820. So obviously gin has a long and sordid history, which is pretty cool. And also what's pretty cool, again, is some of the mixed drinks you can put in. And so like I said, we're going to learn how to make a gin fizz. Oh, good. Ingredients. So if you don't have a shaker at home, totally okay. You can absolutely use a mason jar like I'm using myself. Now I've already got 4 tablespoons of gin in here. I'm using Dingle gin because I've got to represent my Irish heritage. So I've got my Dingle gin right here from my last trip to Ireland. And then what you're also going to put in is you're going to take lemon juice and put a tablespoon and a half of that. I've got to be careful squeezing it out of here because the first time I tried to make this, I ended up with lemon juice absolutely everywhere. Everything smelled very fresh. There we go. And then the recipe actually calls for simple syrup, but if you're not a fan of refined sugar, you can absolutely use maple syrup. Make sure, obviously, that you're using real maple syrup, but it's totally fine, really serves the exact same purpose as the simple syrup and gives it kind of a nice mellow flavor. And you just want 1 tablespoon of that, and then 1 egg white. And then you want to go ahead and put your lid on either your shaker or your mason jar, which obviously is easier said than done. There we go. And then you want to shake this for about 15 seconds. So count down with me. I think that's about 15 seconds. All right, so once you've done that, you're gonna open your shaker or your mason jar back up, put in some ice, and then close it up again. And then you just need to shake until the stuff inside is cold. So however long that takes. And then after that, you don't want the ice to go in, so you're just going to strain the juice, the alcohol juice, back into the cup. And then you just need some seltzer water to top it off with. And that seltzer water will react with the egg white and everything and give it a nice fizzy top. And it is absolutely refreshing and delicious and really yummy. So everyone, I say to you, I'll say sláinte because it is from, my gin is from Ireland. I hope everyone enjoys. So cheers to everyone, sláinte, and have a great week.